Law and order in Pima County. Meet the candidates for sheriff and county attorney. What do they say is working and what would they change? This is Metro Week. The Sheriff's Department enforces the laws. The county attorney prosecutes those accused of violating them. We'll hear from the candidates in those two races after a look at the week's news.
A poll of likely voters in Arizona shows the race between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton is a dead heat in the state. The poll from OH Perspectives gives Secretary Clinton and Mr. Trump 42% each. Libertarian Gary Johnson is at 5% and Green Party candidate Jill Stein is at 1%. The poll had a 3.7% margin of error. 9% of likely Arizona voters are still undecided, according to that poll. The survey was taken following the first presidential debate. Clinton and Trump will meet 2 more times before Election Day. Tuesday night's vice presidential debate was must-see TV for a group of University of Arizona students. The bipartisan group gathered at a restaurant in the student union to watch Mike Pence and Tim Kaine debate for 90 minutes. Most of the students say this is the first presidential election they can vote in, and they're excited. Monday is the last day to register to vote in Arizona. Early ballots go out 3 days after that. A commercial airline flight from Mexico landed at Tucson International Airport for the first time in 8 years on Monday. Aeromar Flight 106 from Hermosillo touched down about a half hour after its scheduled arrival. The incoming flight was about half full and the plane was about 2/3 full heading back to Mexico. Mexicans take about 22 million trips into Arizona each year. For more on all of the week's top stories, visit our website, that address news.azpm.org.
The race for county attorney features a longtime incumbent and a political newcomer. The Pima County Attorney oversees criminal prosecutions and is the legal advisor to the Board of Supervisors. Democrat Barbara LAWALL is the incumbent, seeking her 6th 4-year term. She claims the highest trial rate and lowest plea bargaining rate in the state, an award-winning victim services program, and national recognition for criminal rehabilitation programs. LAWALL says she wants to continue to make changes in her office to improve holding criminals accountable for their conduct while serving victims. She also wants to create innovative ways to prevent crime. Cindy TUELL is a Green Party candidate challenging LAWALL. She's a lawyer and environmental conservation advocate. She consults for nonprofit conservation organizations. TUELL says she wants to end mass incarceration and is opposed to private prisons. She says the county attorney does much more than criminal law and wants to raise awareness of the other aspects of the office. TUELL wants to increase public awareness about how the county attorney's office can impact the environment. Ms. LAWALL and Ms. TUELL came in for a joint interview earlier this week. Thank you both for coming in to do this joint interview together. I really appreciate it. We're just going to start with a question that's kind of broad for the county attorney candidates. How do you reduce crime in Pima County? Ms. LAWALL.
Well, you give me a magic wand, I wave it, and actually what's been happening over the years is violent crime has been on the downswing. It has been reducing year after year after year. So we are doing some things that have been very effective. One of them, I think, that is happening is that we have been, at least in my office, targeting those violent, dangerous predators, putting them in prison for as long as possible, getting them off the street. So you do that with recidivist burglars and thieves and violent people, and you are going to see a reduction in crime because about 80% of the crime committed in any community is committed by about 20% of the people. So if you can carefully target that group, you can make a difference. And another thing I think that we're doing that has had a significant difference is that we have been doing a lot of programming to prevent our young people from becoming that next generation of offenders. So one of the most dramatic reductions in crime that has occurred that we should all be very pleased about is juvenile crime. It has plummeted so much that when I first took over as county attorney 20 years ago, we were prosecuting over 14,000 juveniles, and we're down to about 4,000 now. So you've seen a dramatic reduction there.
I'll cut you off there just to make sure we have an opportunity for Ms. TUELL to answer the same question. How do we reduce crime in Pima County?
Sure. Thank you, Andrea. Well, I think your viewers probably know that criminal law is not my strong suit. I practice civil law and conservation law, but I'm also an activist in the community, and I don't disagree at all with what Ms. LAWALL said. And I would add to that reducing crime in the community takes an improvement in our educational system and helping families stay together, which is going to focus on the immigration system and making sure people aren't being ripped apart by being deported without just cause in our communities.
Now that's a federal issue, so how do you work on that as county attorney?
I think as county attorney, I could do some lobbying with both the state and the federal government, and I could also encourage community activists to get involved in our legislative system, both at the state and the federal level.
Now, both of you say that you would like to reduce the jail population, and in fact, that's a goal of the county as a whole. So what steps would you take to do that? And you'll start, Ms. TUELL.
Well, I think at first I would like to continue to support the programs that Ms. LAWALL has already started, including the drug treatment alternative to prison. I think that's a really good start. If we can keep people from getting put into the system in the first place, they're less likely to go back into the prison system. We need to stop charging juveniles as adults. When we can, we need to keep them in the education system and not put them in the prison system or the jail system. And I think we need to make sure that in Pima County, we don't see the private prisons start becoming something that is accepted in our community.
And Ms. LAWALL, how do you reduce or continue to work on reducing the jail population?
Well, we're doing a number of very specific measures with the Safety and Justice Challenge from the MacArthur Grant. And one of the things that we're doing is we're identifying who doesn't belong in jail, because oftentimes what happens is the jail is populated by a number of misdemeanants who are there and have very lengthy stays because they can't make bond, and the bond may be as low as $50. So if we can come up with some other ways in which to deal with these individuals who are recycling through on a regular basis, populating the jail, and that is a significant majority in the jail are not violent, they're not dangerous. These are individuals that really basically are mentally ill, they have substance abuse issues, and they are homeless. And so we're working on trying to get them in other places rather than the jail being the mental health institution.
I have a series of questions individually for you. So we'll start with you, Ms. LAWALL. You state that you're proud of having a high trial rate and a low plea bargain rate. Tell us why that's important to you, why that's a goal.
I think it's very important, and it's always been important to me as a prosecutor, because when you plead out a case and you have a plea bargain, you're giving away a number of years in prison. You are reducing the crime and reducing the exposure. And so if what you do is you target those individuals who are the most dangerous, the most repetitive, and are the ones who threaten and endanger all of us the most, and you take them to trial, you're going to get the maximum exposure and you're going to get them off the street for the longest period of time. And that's important to the public safety of this community, which is my primary job as the county prosecutor, is to protect that public safety. So that's why I think it's important to keep the trials up on the right targeted people. You can't just have trials just to have trials, but you target the right ones, take the ones that deserve probation or lesser amounts of time, and you plead them out, and you've saved the taxpayer a great deal of money.
And Ms. TUELL, you would like to make sure that motorists who hit and harm and kill pedestrians or cyclists are prosecuted. And you say that you would change the law. What changes would you make?
Well, changing the law would take lobbying at the state legislature to make laws reflect the need to address the seriousness of motorists killing cyclists and pedestrians. I've spoken to many people on this issue. There are attorneys and there are people whose family members have been killed or maimed who said they're having a really hard time getting the county prosecutor's office to charge people who run them over or kill them with any crime at all. They're having a problem getting the sheriffs or the city police to cite the motorists, for instance, for running a red light. The police feel that they don't need to cite the person who's run us over because they won't get the support at the county attorney's office. And I think that needs to change. I've spoken to an attorney at the county attorney's office who told me that it's just not right that the motorist who ran you down just didn't see you and it wasn't their fault. And you know, their guilt should be enough. And I think that is flatly wrong, and that should never be coming out of the county attorney's office.
Would you like to respond?
Oh yes. Now, I don't know who it was that spoke with Ms. TUELL about that, but they certainly weren't voicing my policies or my position. We have a vehicular unit that takes very seriously manslaughter and negligent homicide cases, and we prosecute them whenever the facts of the case meet the legal requirements for prosecution. And so one of the things that we always have to be conscious of, and the thing that I think is difficult for people to understand, is that sometimes an accident is an accident and it is not a criminal charge. Now, whenever we can prove the fact that somebody acted with criminal intent, and that's what we have to have, then we do charge it. We take those cases seriously. They almost always go to trial, and we get the maximum amount of exposure that's important in those cases. So we have several of the bicyclist cases that are in the works right now and are coming up toward trial date. So I don't know where she gets her information or who it was that spoke on behalf of my office, but that certainly isn't accurate.
Do you care to respond?
Sure. Well, I think the bicycling community feels that it is accurate, that the county attorney's office doesn't provide the support we'd like. I'm a member of that community. I don't own a vehicle. So it's very important to me to feel equally protected as if I were in a vehicle. But I think the main thing that needs to change is the laws of this state. They don't reflect the serious nature of distracted driving and its impacts on pedestrian and cyclists. And so if I were county attorney when I'm elected, I would immediately begin lobbying to get those laws changed.
All right, and I'm going to move us to a new topic now, just so we cover different bases depending on what the viewer is looking to hear. And Ms. TUELL, you comment on your website a few times about the myriad non-criminal work that the county attorney's office does, and you said it at the beginning of the interview. What do you think the public needs to know about that aspect of the job, and what would be your approach to it?
Put simply, the public needs to know that there is a non-criminal side to the office. I've spoken to so many people who have no idea that the county attorney's office has a civil side and that they're responsible for enforcing environmental regulations. That's a really important thing to get out there. I was shocked that even the local Sierra Club group had no idea that the county attorney's office plays an important role in conservation, and I'd like to see that elevated. And that's part of why I'm running, is simply to put the message out there that the county attorney's office is about more than criminal law. It's about protecting clean air, clean water, and specifically protecting your right to public records and your right to attend open meetings of the agencies which the county attorney's office represents.
And Ms. LAWALL, the non-criminal side of your office, what does the public need to know, and what would you be doing in that end?
Well, I agree with Ms. TUELL there. Our office does enormous amounts of civil work. We represent every elected official in Pima County, all the county departments. We do the legal work on behalf of the county. We just did some very significant environmental work in the multi-species conservation plan section 10 permit, which was very complicated and complex, and we got a permit from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Department to protect the environment in Pima County on behalf of all of the citizens of Pima County. We do all the legal work for the Clean Water Act and the wastewater management, and we do enormous amounts of work with mental health hearings and all the land use acquisitions. And so we do this work. We are a public law firm, much like doing private work, and our clients are the citizens of Pima County. We do this on behalf of Pima County. It would be really nice if it had a higher profile and people were more aware of it. But even without that, we just keep doing our work and doing absolutely astounding work. And I think the clients that we have, the members of the Board of Supervisors and the department heads, are very pleased with the civil legal work. My office as a whole, the civil and the criminal office, we are the largest law firm in southern Arizona, and we do enormous amounts of work for everybody.
I'm going to ask you both to keep this last answer short because we're running low on time. Just very quickly, what is the working relationship, what should it be, between the county attorney and sheriff?
Well, first of all, I'm the lawyer for the sheriff. And so we have the lawyer-attorney relationship, but the working relationship should be a close one. It should be one in which we cooperate, but at the same time, as the civil attorney, I have to have sort of a little bit of a standoff in the sense that I have to give legal advice and not always be on the same page as the sheriff. But in the criminal arena, we work very closely together.
And I'm going to cut you off just to make sure Ms. TUELL can also answer.
Yeah, this is something I've given some thought to, and I think as a legal representative of the sheriff's office, it's really difficult to then also adequately represent the people whom the sheriff might be harming. The sheriff's offices across the country are experiencing unprecedented incidents of human rights and civil rights violations, especially against people of color. And I think it's important that the county attorney be aware of that and find a way to reflect the needs of the people as well as the client.
Once again, thanks to both of you for coming in together. I think it's important for voters to see the two of you together.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Next, we'll meet the candidates for sheriff, but then stay tuned for an exclusive interview with one of the presidential candidates.
I'm pledging as President of the United States to be the most frugal president ever elected.
Gary Johnson is on the ballot in all 50 states, but he's not on the debate stage. Hear from his campaign, plus the candidates in the 1st Congressional District. That's later on Arizona Week. In the sheriff's race, a Democratic appointee seeks election and a Republican makes his second try for the office. The sheriff oversees 1,500 employees with a $145 million budget for 4 divisions: corrections, administration, investigations, and operations. The Pima County Board of Supervisors appointed Chris Nanos as sheriff after Clarence Dupnick retired in 2015. Nanos began his law enforcement career in El Paso, then came to the Pima County Sheriff's Department, where he started at the county jail and eventually worked in all 4 divisions. Mark Napier works as Associate Director of Parking and Transportation at the University of Arizona, where he runs the department's operations. Before that, he worked his way from officer to captain in the Tucson Police Department. As captain, he supervised patrols and training. He later was an assistant director of the Glendale Police Department. He teaches criminal justice online for Boston University. The candidates' schedules did not allow a joint interview. Here's my conversation with Chris Nanos from last week. Thanks for your time, and I just want to start by asking you to characterize the relationship that the department has with the community and maybe what needs to be done to improve that.
Wow, I think we have a great relationship with the community. I think what we're doing with the community is on a bunch of different levels. First of all, my role isn't just with public safety in terms of cops on the street, but I'm also responsible for a jail, 2,000 inmates. And I have a big budget of $150 million that I have to be responsible with as well. When we talk about community involvement, it doesn't just deal with me being out in the community, that's a lot of it, but I think we can improve it. Let me go back up a minute if I may. Our department, the reason you don't see us, I believe, involved in some of the incidents you see across the nation is because we are engaged with this community, we're involved. I have deputies who every year for the last 10, 15 years have gone to the food bank and donate hours, stuffing 100,000 food bags. My corrections officers deal with those who are deployed overseas at the wars and their families and created a software known as chat so that they can communicate with each other and stay in touch with their loved ones. I have civilians who, during their lunch break, run out and serve food at the soup kitchens. This isn't because I'm asking or some sergeant tells them to, it's because that's who they are. It's in their heart, it's what, they're a part of this community, as much a part of it as you are. And they know that. And I think when you look at what's gone on around the country and you talk of community relations, somewhere those cities have lost that connectivity. And I don't know how they've done that. I don't even have an answer to how they get back. But I think it's important that that I also engage in that community connection, that I have a role to play. And my commanders, I have 50-some commanders when you take the correction side of it and the commission, the deputy side of it. And we have got a program called Commanders in the Community. And I encourage people to call us if they have projects. We've gone to the soup kitchen, the food banks, different things, animal care. This week we're going to be at the Homes for Habitat for Humanity and help put up a home. I'm kind of dangerous with the instruments, but we'll do it. We just think that it's important that we're engaged in the community in ways that the community feels comfortable with us to relate with us and talk to us. And it doesn't matter whether you're in the city or the county, you're all part of this community.
I want to get to as many kind of different issues as we can, so I want to move on to the jail.
Okay.
As you mentioned, it's part of the Sheriff's Department. The county as a whole has a goal to reduce the jail population and a
Yes.
grant to do so.
Yes.
What specific steps will you take
Okay,
to
so
do that?
we have the MacArthur grant, the foundation, from the MacArthur Foundation, and that's part of it. But I have to go back to when I first took on this job. I looked at that jail and I said, we were at 2,000 inmates. If we get to 2,100, the federal government will come in and say, you don't have beds, we're taking over, or you need to build a new jail. Well, I could go back to the taxpayer and say, I need about $100 million to build 700 beds again, like we did in 2007, and increase the size of that. Or I could take a step back and say, who's in our jail and why are they there? And we look at who's in our jail, and what I learned was we have a pretty sad jail. You're a bad guy, you hurt somebody, you threaten to hurt somebody, you need to be in jail. But we have a number of people in there who are on there for either substance abuse or mental illness. 70 to 80% of that population suffers from mental illness. And that's a sad statement. Sick people don't belong in jail. Sick people belong at hospitals. So we need to find a better way to deal with some of those issues. We have people there who go to jail because they couldn't pay a traffic ticket. That shouldn't happen. That's not justice. And we put them in jail and we tow their car, and their car goes to a place called car jail for 30 days, and it's all because they couldn't pay a ticket. What have you done? You've added a fine to them. You've added more fines. You've made your tow companies happy because they get to fine them for 30 days of storage. Some people walk away from their cars because they can't afford it. It's very regressive. So one of the things I've done in that regard is we have gotten with our lobbyists to approach the state and work with the court, Supreme Court, Scott Bales, on trying to change the suspended licensing laws. It's just not work. It's very regressive. But the other side of this is we deal with recidivism. And we just met today for Pay for Success. It's a good program. We're going to look into it out of Utah to try to deal with some of the homeless issues. But when you look at my jail, all of the recidivism rate, MacArthur Grant Foundation, all of that, that's the back door. We need to get some wraparound services from all the community people, Simpatico, Ariba, Community Bridges who's coming in and providing housing. All of this needs to happen. But the one thing I can't let go of, and it's probably my main thrust or main initiative, and that's my youth initiative. When I look at that jail, there's no scholars there. People aren't in jail with college degrees, very few. In fact, we now know if you can't graduate high school, you stand 70% chance, 7 out of 10 times greater chance you're going to end up in my jail.
We've only got a minute left, so what do you do to try and keep those youth out?
So we are now, we recreated our SRO unit.
School resource officers.
School resource. We have 12 of them. I plan to expand that to 20 because we have 20 schools. It's important that we're there. We contact 76,000 kids last year. We are involved in them with a leadership program, a youth violence, teen violence program, a number of things. RICO dollars. I take RICO dollars. That's drug money I can use to buy stuff. I got stuff. We now use it for strictly those programs out there like Youth on Their Own, Boys and Girls Club, a number of different nonprofits who help kids graduate. Youth on Their Own, 98% success rate graduating kids. They get my RICO dollars.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off because that's all the time we have. So thank you so much for coming in. Mark Napier joined me this week for his interview about the Sheriff Department's needs. Let's start by having you characterize the relationship the department has with the public and how you would work on that or change it.
Well, I think at the line level, the department has a great relationship with the public. I think the line level people, the deputies and sergeants and the people actually out doing the work have a great relationship with the public. I think that the senior administration could do a little bit better in that department and certainly reach out better and more effectively to other law enforcement agencies. There's always been a fracture between the Pima County Sheriff's Department and the Tucson Police Department that is counterproductive, and it doesn't work in anybody's best interest. And I think we could improve on that a lot. I think we also need to be able to go out to communities, parts of the community, whether it be partisan or not, that don't necessarily agree with us, because those are the people that you need to talk to the most.
Would that be sort of holding public events or showing up at other people's events? What would you do?
I think both. I think you need to be open to the fact that you would hold public events where people could come who are interested, but also make yourself available to all sorts of community events, charity events. I'll be doing a Make-A-Wish walk on Sunday here on campus at the university, and I try to make myself available to do all kinds of things like that because you hear different things. It's great to interact with the public because you are made aware of sentiments and things that you otherwise would not be privy to.
Now, the county as a whole has a goal of reducing the jail population, not just in the sheriff's department, but other departments as well. What specific steps would you take to reach that goal?
Well, I think that you need to pay attention to who we're incarcerating, and part of that is the judicial system. The Sheriff's Department is on one part of it, which is the enforcement part, but the judicial part is a separate part, and the sentencing practices and so forth. I think we need to more effectively reach out to community organizations to find alternatives to sentencing. Drug courts have been very successful in a lot of areas because they divert people that actually have a problem with substance abuse more than criminality into a different venue instead of incarcerating them, which really is counterproductive. Sometimes we use incarceration simply because we don't know, have other options. So I'd want to build community options, especially with younger people, because you can get into the labeling of younger people where they get into the judicial system, they get incarcerated, and they begin to think of themselves as bad, and they become repeat offenders simply because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I think we need to work with community groups to provide very thoughtful alternatives to incarceration for nonviolent offenders.
You left law enforcement a few years ago to come to your current position at the University of Arizona. Could someone argue that that puts you a little more out of touch with public safety needs, and could you respond to that?
No, I think that somebody could argue that. I don't think it's accurate. I've been teaching at the graduate level for the last 12 years. I'll be teaching tonight, actually supervising teachers.
And what do you teach?
Criminal justice for Boston University and their master's program. I actually supervise online teachers now. I got promoted, which I just hate, but because I love to teach, and now I end up supervising teachers and also evaluating curriculum in that program. I've 3 times been a peer reviewer for federal grant programs for the Department of Justice. I stay in touch with law enforcement completely, but I'll tell you, I think the most valuable time for me has been my time away, is seeing law enforcement from the outside in. You can't do that from the inside. You think you can, but you can't. And I think being a part of the university and a part of the other things that I've done in the community since I left law enforcement has not made me further detached, it's made me better connected. And I think that's a real benefit, is being in the educational realm and not losing touch with the academic nature of law enforcement. My son's a police officer. I hear about police stuff all the time through him as well. So I've not really lost touch at all, and I think it's much more of a benefit than a liability.
What's an example of that perspective change that you've been able to gain by leaving the law enforcement field that you would take back in?
I think a better appreciation of social justice issues. On campus here, I've been a member of the President's Cabinet, and currently a member of her Diversity Task Force. And so I'm interacting with people that have very different views of law enforcement than I might have been privy to wearing a uniform and doing the job. So I think I'm more attuned to social justice issues. I think part of that is because Boston University is certainly not a right-wing school. It's very progressive education, and it's made me appreciate the fact that there are different thoughts about law enforcement in the community that you need to be attuned to, and people are less likely to disclose those to you when you're in law enforcement. When you're in casual conversations with people, or you're part of community groups or groups here at the university, you hear a lot more, and if you keep your ears open, I think that you can learn a whole lot more about the climate that law enforcement operates in than you can from being inside of it.
That climate that law enforcement operates in, how would you characterize morale within the department right now?
It's probably the worst I've ever seen, and I've been around law enforcement for more than 30 years total. I don't think I've ever seen an agency that was where the morale as a whole, now there's little pockets of happy people, but I mean, if you look at the agency as a whole, morale is terrible. Deputies call me regularly. I've had to meet people behind closed businesses at 10 o'clock at night because they're afraid of retaliation from the sheriff because of talking to me, which shouldn't be the case at all. They should be free to talk to and evaluate any candidate they want. But morale right now is really low. I think that's evidenced by the fact that the Pima County Deputies Association and the Corrections Officers Association have both endorsed me and indicated a lack of confidence in the current leadership. That's symbolic of something that's fundamentally and systemically wrong with the department, and I think that's an issue.
What can you do to change that?
I think provide new leadership. I have an infectious enthusiasm for law enforcement, and I believe in servitude leadership. I believe in it with all my heart, that the role of a boss is to serve the people who follow you. And if you go from that mindset, it doesn't mean pandering to them or any of those things, but mean genuinely caring about the people who are out doing the real work. I was a police officer in a car taking calls for service for 10 years before I did anything else, and I did that deliberately because I wanted to know what law enforcement officers do. I'd seen people move up too fast. Pardon me?
Just a few seconds left.
Okay,
if you wanna wrap
and
up that
so I wanted to be sure that I knew what they did, and I think that's given me a real appreciation for where the real work's done, and it's not done by people with stars and bars.
Thanks so much for coming in. Now, a correction to last week's show. We spelled Green Party candidate Martín Bastidas' name incorrectly. Here's the correct spelling. That's it for us. Thanks for watching.